Hello. We're back.
We're back. We're back. Welcome to another episode 3
Mhm.
of the Attic podcast. It's good to see you guys. Welcome.
Thank you for coming back. We appreciate it. And today, Negs has chosen the topic.
Yeah, I want to talk about free speech because it seems to be a hot topic lately. Not the place where you get the emo shit, but it's a hot topic because everybody wants to have free speech until somebody else's free speech encroaches on their feelings. And what led me to pick this topic today was the fact that we witnessed a creator by the name of Miss Fucking Wonderful, MFW, Katie Roby, as some of you will know her, lay out a direct violent threat to somebody. And that's what brought this up, is like, is that freedom of speech? And sure, she has the right to say that, but she doesn't have freedom from consequences.
Correct. Now, I am very, very attached to the First Amendment because of what I did for 30 years, how I made a living for 30 years. No other country has a First Amendment like ours. None. And the First Amendment is an amazing gift that was given to us by individuals who are disparagingly referred to as a bunch of old white men. Well, they knew a thing or two. And giving us a First Amendment was amazingly advanced for the time. The First Amendment enshrines certain rights, not just freedom of speech, but also freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, being able to petition the government. So let me just make sure that I got all of those. If I forget one, then so be it. I always forget something. Let's see. It's speech, press, assembly, religion, and petitioning the government. So there are 5 rights that are enshrined in the First Amendment. Obviously, when we're talking about social media, we are talking about private companies, and they can decide what kind of speech codes they enforce on their users. However, in general, is that sort of speech protected? Are threats protected?
Are they protected?
Well, let's take a look. Okay, so there are certain types of speech that are restricted, including defamation is not a protected class of speech. Uh, Imitating currency is not a protected form of speech. You are not permitted to lie under oath. And the issue of fighting words is also a hotly contested topic. Now, um, is that threat protected? That is a very, very good question. I would say that Indiana law probably says no, it is not.
You would be correct. You would be correct. Actually, what had happened is this individual MFW had what in our state what they would call intimidation. And if it caused that individual to feel any kind of way about it, like unsafe, then she did commit a crime. So you could say whatever you want. The government isn't going to stop you from saying it, but that doesn't mean that there aren't laws in place to protect other people from prevent. Because, like, can you imagine a world where everybody just went around in great detail, told you how they were going to end you every day? No, you can't do that. You can't do that. The same reason, like, when it comes to freedom of speech on these platforms, so let's just take Foodie Beauty, for example. She's a hot target. There's so many channels around her. Within terms of service, that's a no-no. You can't do that. But that's a terms of service. The government's not going to come in and say, quit talking about this person every day, but the company can. And then when you gravitate over to Frenchie making these threats about calling immigration and whatnot, I don't know what Canadian laws are, but that sounds like harassment and intimidation to me.
I just wanted to quickly run down forms of speech that are not covered by the First Amendment: obscenity, fraud, child pornography, speech integral to illegal conduct. So here we have an example: speech that incites imminent lawless action, speech that violates intellectual property law, true threats, And then any sort of commercial infringement. So that would mean copyright infringement. That is not
Yeah.
protected.
I think every single reactor is guilty of that. You know, because essentially some of these channels are just intellectual property theft through and through.
Well, that's when you get fair use involved, and fair use is very case by case.
Let's talk about fair use for a second.
Mhm.
Within fair use, it states that you can't profit from what you're doing in order for it to qualify for fair use.
Where does it say that?
I read that. It's what I read. Unless somebody gave me a edited version of it, but that's what I read. Is it had to be educational. You couldn't profit from somebody else's work, but you could use it for educational purposes and informational purposes.
Okay, I don't think that that's correct, because if you look at the H3H3 case, there were two cases. H3H3 was one, and I wish that I could remember the other one. But basically, it's a question of whether you transform the original content. So that means in terms of parody and such. But H3H3 profited off of the content that they used from that other creator. So it's really a question of how much of it you use and how much of it you transform. So in other words, if you just have a channel where you upload somebody else's content with no change, like what's her name does to you?
Lasagna.
Mango
Jones. Yes.
Mango Jones. Yes. That is an interesting question. I wonder if you struck her, if you would have a leg to stand on, if you could get the money that she's made off of those uploads.
Probably not up through YouTube,
because there is no transformational value whatsoever to what she's done.
No, she could probably lose her Cash App since it's attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make money off of my content. Like, oh, I'm painstakingly uploading this person's. I'm painstakingly pirating Lord of the Rings. Please pay me. No, you can't do that.
And there was also a channel called Hamber Collective. It was called Hamber, HXMBER. And they used to just put together playlists of Amberlynn Reid's content, and they would run it for days. You know, one after the other, sometimes on a long weekend. You could start watching on Thursday night and you would finish up on Monday night. And that's all that they would do, is just completely rerun her content. No transformational value, no nothing, just uploading. That is theft. That is content theft. There's no question about it.
What AK said, it does fall down to the judge. And if you want to take it, that's the biggest problem with, especially with YouTube, is when you're messing around with all of us peasants down here in the muck,
right?
Is that we don't have legal team money and access. Well,
that's what it comes down to,
right? Like Adidas or Nike or Lego or Nintendo does. Mm-hmm. They could snap their fingers and spend $100,000 to shut you down for making $4.50.
Right.
So,
right.
But nobody has the finances to take it through to court. But yeah, it is up to the judge ultimately. Mm-hmm. But that's where that whole profiting from it, and it's supposed to be educational.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And, you know, the funny thing, too, is if, for example, I just wanted to bring it back to like the legality of the speech issue. The oft quoted line of shouting fire in a crowded theater, how that is not allowed. It is allowed, actually. And the reason that came about, it's very funny. A bunch of Yiddish speaking socialists were handing out leaflets around the time of World War I to oppose the draft into the American army and warning the US not to get involved in World War I. And they were arrested and they were jailed. And that's what the Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes was referring to. Shouting fire in a crowded theater. He was saying that what they were doing, their opposition to the war, was dangerous. And then later on, that was changed, obviously, because it's not a constitutional position to take, that somebody is not allowed to oppose a war in this country. Of course they are. Yeah. So anyway, that's some historical background.
You can oppose a war, but you can't threaten to murder people.
No, you can't.
You cannot do that. It's a big no-no.
No, you can't.
Yeah. So, and you guys can take me, for example. I'm in court right now for much less, significantly less. Not even a threat. But there's some states that have really silly laws on the books that are anti-First Amendment. But I know that once you go into detail because that's what I was told. I was threatened with the AR-15 by the same individual who went on that tirade, and the cop just said it's not specific enough.
Mhm.
When, where, how?
Right.
Okay. Well, I know with the gun, but I don't know when, where, and how. That same individual described, when, where, how, the situation, how it was going to happen, who was going to be watching.
Mhm.
That's pretty specific.
The same thing has happened to me. I have been threatened quite specifically by people, by a certain community. And no, it was not Negs. And no, it was not Negative Nation. And no, it was not any of the players that one might think. It was by the anti-Onision community. And I received very, very, very specific threats of a violent nature, which I did report to the police. The police told me there's nothing that we can do because they're a government entity. They are not allowed to decide what is and is not illegal speech. The threat was not specific enough. They told me that there was nothing they could do. They wouldn't even take a report. And their suggestion to me was block the person and keep it moving. That was it. There was nothing, not only nothing that they could do, there was nothing that they were willing to do. Nothing.
The police aren't going to do a whole lot unless it's rather specific, like somebody's going to kick in your door, and
Right.
put a gun in your. What they say, they can do something about that.
Mhm.
But you have to. It's going to be up to the state because, like you said, the government can't stop you from saying it, but the state can punish you for the fear that you instill. And I know that type of speech in my state, and this is a red state, so you have to push things pretty far. But once you start involving firearms and direct threats, they're going to take it serious because we have constitutional carry,
Mhm.
and that is it is a right. But once you start breaking the law, it becomes a privilege.
Mhm.
So.
Mhm. Well, that's the other thing too. I mean, we all remember, well, those of us of a certain age or people who are music fans, we've been through the equivalent of like what, rap battles or bands dissing each other or bands threatening to commit violence on each other, bands using very like violent and combative language saying, I'm going to come and get you and blah, blah, blah. That is not a threat.
Right. That's creative license.
Correct. And this is a very important distinction as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Because a state in this country is trying to, whether I don't know, somebody's trying to hold me accountable for a song I wrote. A song, one line from a song. I have creative license. That's already been established. Like take Tupac's "Hit 'Em Up."
Right.
God damn. Throw the towel. He went in hard, and did somebody imagine a gangster going to the magistrate? Tupac said he's gonna fuck my wife. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Gangsters, fuck boy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There have been a lot of efforts made, or there's been a lot of talk made about restricting what people should be allowed to speak about publicly. And whether there should be restrictions. In the 90s, there were speech codes on college campuses. Back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, when the ACLU actually cared about free speech, which they don't anymore, apparently. They are now on the side of restricting speech, which is something I never thought I would live to see. But anyway, but there are groups, and it's not just on the right, it's coming largely from the left now, of people who do want to restrict what people should and should not be able to say. And we saw this in some of the most grotesque forms after the Charlie Hebdo shooting, when there were people that I knew, people who were journalists, people who were photojournalists, people who were artists, who were basically suggesting that the cartoonists got what was coming to them. That if you continue to poke the bear and if you continue to offend a minority or whatever, that then if somebody comes for you and kills you, then that is your fault.
Yikes.
That is a very, very dangerous precedent. Very dangerous precedent. And the fact that it was coming from people in my line of work was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, that's fucked.
Yep.
That's fucked. I mean, like, listen, comedy should have no limits.
Right.
All right. Creative license, music, art, it should have no limits. And there's always been figures in history who want to censor somebody, and some of them do it in ways that are completely brutal. And if you're if you think that somebody got what they deserved, then you should be side-eyed. You're acting kind of sus. So that means when the chips are down, you would probably snitch on me. and have me executed in the street.
Mhm.
You know, that's the type of people I don't want to be around. Anyway.
Well, and now what we're running into, the hilarity on Twitter with the parody accounts that are popping up that are costing companies a lot of money, because these parody accounts are popping up for like Lockheed Martin and Pfizer and other Tesla. Elon Musk was very grumpy when somebody made a parody account of him, but now these companies have shown that their stocks are tanking. They have lost millions, if not billions of dollars on the marketplace. And so they are taking exception to this. So again, I mean, if you want to run a multi-billion dollar company like a troll, then fine. But guess what's going to happen? These companies are now pulling their advertising off of Twitter, and they are very angry. And there is a hint that lawsuits are incoming. This is not a good plan. Okay.
No, yeah, I'm not heartbroken over a pharmaceutical company losing billions of dollars. I mean, they should make insulin free. You know what I'm saying? Since our diets are basically the cause of why everybody's type 2 in it. So, well, it's and Twitter. This is to me. This is kind of like, this is long overdue. All these companies had no problem backing all these radical ideologues and these agendas that people were just kind of going along with, so they didn't get beaten ahead with a padlock and a sock. And now they're losing billions of dollars because people are finally able to truly have freedom of speech on that platform. And he'll reel it in. He'll reel it in.
You know what's scary to me, though? This is a conversation that Negs and I have had on a number of occasions, and I've mentioned this on my channel, and Negs has mentioned this on his channels as well, which is, I don't know where the millennials and Gen Z got the idea that words and violence are the same thing. And therefore, to counter offensive language or to counter ideas that you don't like with actual physical violence is justified. And we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it all over the place. And it is absolutely terrifying. It's an extremely, extremely dangerous precedent when we cannot have the freedom to debate one another, but instead we have to counter with extreme violence or shutting people down instead of countering with some kind of a rational plan or rational idea. Coming back or retorting to an idea that you don't agree with by making an ad hominem attack, like you are a racist, you are a transphobe, you are an anti whatever, you are a blank, fill in the phobe, which shuts down the conversation, is not the way to go. And we see where that has led to in modern society. And I am not a fan.
I'm not a fan of it, but if you look at this midterm, how everybody voted, that shows how divided everybody is. There's still a lot of people, like they said red wave is red trickle, because there are some people still voting on ideas and policies and not just orange man running again. But you see how divided everybody is, just based on, I mean, like I was watching this election cycle, and I know people make smear ads, attack ads, smear campaigns and all that. It was brutal. It was like, what are your policies? Like, what the fuck are you running on? What are you running on? I support fracking. I don't support fracking. Gender affirmation. It's like, okay. Twice. What is a twice convicted racist? The fuck is that?
What?
How do you get convicted of racism?
What are you talking about?
Carrie Lake was calling Katie Hobbs a twice convicted racist. Like, where does that come from?
I missed that one.
She drop a hard R N-word a couple times at a party while drinking tequila? Is that how you get convicted of it? Like, what does that even mean?
Well, here's the thing. Nothing works. Nothing gets voters to the polls like fear. Fear is what motivates people to vote. Obama was an exception with the hope stuff. But when it comes down to it, the reason that political ads are so negative is because they work. If they didn't work, we wouldn't see them. That's why they're so common.
Oh, that's right. She fired somebody. She has an actual racial discrimination suit against her over a former employee of her office or something. Yeah, I saw that, but like, I don't even know what the outcome of that is. So,
listen, if you saw some of the racial discrimination cases that popped up at VOA,
See, so that apparently y'all are yelling at the wrong people about racism. You'll be yelling at poor white people. You can go yell at them rich white motherfuckers up there.
Mhm.
They okay about racism because we're trying. Hey, we're all in this together. I just want you to know that.
Mhm. Yeah. Sometimes I know that this is going to be an incredibly controversial hot take. Sometimes you're just a shitty employee. Sometimes you just suck at your job. If you're lucky enough to be part of let's say a class action suit where you end up getting awarded an enormous amount of money just because you happen to apply for a job at a certain time period where there was some sort of discrimination. Well, okay, fine. It happens. But whatever. But yeah, I mean, I have seen racial discrimination cases that are absolutely unbelievable. And as a union rep, we had to entertain them. We
Yikes.
had to. It was part of what we had to do. But let's just say that there was a lot of talk in the union office about these cases and about whether they were winnable or unwinnable. And what I noticed was that the ones that were legitimate would not get very far. But the illegitimate ones somehow would go all the. It was crazy. It was.
I want to touch on what YouTube Reject
Mhm.
Live said in the chat here, and that was maybe the worker just sucked at their job and it didn't have to do with race. That's another thing another example you can look at where everything it has to be race related now because of the rhetoric and the saber rattling in both political parties. Let's be real, there's only two, and that's where it's at. It's like, oh, I was fired, so it must have been because I'm black. It must be because my name is Juan. It must be because I'm from China. It must be something like that because I'm over. Everybody thinks, listen, I know everybody wants to be special, but sometimes you're just a piece of shit.
Yeah. It's a scary time. It's a scary time. And it's weird that with the advent of social media, where we have access to different types of ways of thinking at our fingertips, that we have become more intolerant than we have ever been. And we've also, I would argue, we've become stupider than we've ever been. I don't understand how this is possible. We are walking around with these little, apparati in our pockets that have the wealth of knowledge of the Library of Congress, and yet we're incredibly stupid. I don't know how that happens, but it's an amazing phenomenon.
Well, YouTube Reject Live says sometimes we are all equally pieces of shit. JK, I'm not just kidding. No, I just want to make that clear. I'm not kidding. We're all not special. Like I saw the beginning of the participation trophy generation. Those were my kids.
Oh yeah.
And it may have been prior to that, but I remember going to the soccer games and they were giving all the kids an award. And I said, what are you doing? What did he do? Like, this is my kid. What did he do? Did he do anything to earn that? No, everybody gets one. I'm like, what's the motivation? Well, we don't even keep score. Well, I'm going home. What's the point of this then? What are we teaching the kids? Communism is cool, Get out of here.
Well, that's the problem when you try to undermine competition that way. I mean, I understand what it was like to be picked last because you suck at sports, or that you hated dodgeball because it was basically organized bullying. I get that. But look, some of us are better at certain things than others are. That's just the way it goes. Okay, I suck at certain things. I'm really bad at math. I would be a very bad any profession that involves math. I would never be an engineer. That's why I didn't go to college to study that. I know I suck at that. That's okay. I would never then go out and I would never sue to get into MIT and claim that I didn't get in because of my gender, my religion, my whatever, because I'm not good enough. I understand that. Some of us are just not good enough for that kind of thing.
When my Kroger card gets rejected, I blame it on my race. I do. I flop down on the floor and I scream, it's because I'm white. And everybody looks at me and says, sir, get the fuck out of the middle of the floor, please. Math. I suck at math. I'm horrible at math. I could never be an accountant unless you want to be audited annually. then I'm your Huckleberry. But yet people, beyond those sports, my kids eventually learned a competitive spirit. They both went into play some degree of varsity athletics, and they learned competition and sucking it up. Like how my son's baseball team won one game or no 3 games in 4 years. Bless their hearts. I think it may have been more than 3 games, but it wasn't much more than 3 games because I sat through a lot of those cold, rainy games with the wind blowing, watching my child's team get beaten into a pulp. But they learn that's okay. You just try it. You live to fight another day.
Competition is good, you guys.
Sorry,
Competition
I
is
have a bit of
really good.
trauma. I have a bit of trauma from sitting in the cold for 4 hours. A baseball game is forever in the cold. I'm just saying.
That's true. That's true.
I hate baseball now with a passion.
Well, I hate sports, period. But, well, and sports have gotten a lot worse now with certain advances that have been made that I am not keen on, which is a topic for another day. I think we need to talk about men and women's sports at some point.
Okay, we do that for the next one.
Yeah, that's good. But yeah, so it's sad to me that people are so threatened by language. It's really sad to me. If you go back and you look at what newspapers used to publish in the 1700s in this country, and the way that they would ruthlessly and brutally attack politicians, and the way that these newspapers were organs of political parties in a very open, blatant way. And somehow we survived as a society, and we evolved and we changed. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing.
But it's really sad to me that people are so frightened and threatened by what people say. It's really disturbing, and you see this. I mean, look. For example, in a newsroom, there are all kinds of different rules about what is and is not acceptable. And so, for example, when you are broadcasting into a foreign country, their idea of what is acceptable viewing on television may be very, very different. So, for example, in certain countries, you can run the aftermath of a genocide. You can run mass graves. You can run extremely confrontational and disturbing footage. But the Americans who are making the decisions in an American newsroom will use American standards to say, well, no, we can't run. I mean, in recent example, Ukraine, the mass graves that were being found in Ukraine, for example, or across the continent of Africa, we would be very sensitive because, again, we were using American standards, but not taking into account that in these countries, this is standard viewing because it's part of life and people understand that it is part of life. There was a demonstration in Nigeria, in a province of Nigeria not so long ago, where there was a massacre and the townspeople were demanding justice for the victims. And they took the bodies of the victims, they carried them to the local legislature, and they dumped the corpses in front of the building. And so this is the kind of thing that does happen. Now, we can pretend it doesn't happen, but it does happen. So again, we use our judgment based on our squeamishness, but we also need to acknowledge that there are places where this kind of thing is understood to happen, and they want to see it because it's reality. It's part of life. Now, you could never do that in this country. No,
there's laws against dumping bodies on the front step of a legislator. Yeah. So I want to address the Gen X thing. Yeah, Christina, we are Gen X, and I know when I grew up, when somebody made a threat, it usually was followed up with violence. The only time I was ever afraid of words is when somebody said, "I'm gonna whoop your ass," because I knew I was gonna get my ass whooped.
Right.
So but like going out and calling somebody a big dummy, big banana nose, goofy, stupid lol cow. Okay, nah, okay, calm down. Gen X, we were thrown to the wolves.
Yep.
And expected to come home. I mean, seriously, I'd leave my house and they didn't know if I was alive until I came home.
Right.
I can't, like, my kid leaves. He doesn't even leave, really. But if he does go somewhere, he's got a phone, and I'm going to be like, call me every hour. And maybe that's just because the world is different. But
Negs is a helicopter parent.
Maybe. I got to keep him away from the dope. And the
dope.
The dope. And the assholes. Yeah, times were different, you know. I mean, I'd get on my little mountain bike or my
Mhm,
BMX and ride 5 miles from home, go be playing in the river, nearly drown a few times, you
mhm.
know, and get beat up and not even tell your parents, just come home and get up and do it again the next day. It's no wonder we're all fucked up.
I don't know, I think we're pretty amazing, though. I mean, I would go out with my boxer. I would go out for hours, and we would just do whatever the hell we wanted to do. I guess my parents thought that I was okay because I was with the dog. But now it's like, it's really sad. Like I don't see in any of the neighborhoods that I've lived in DC, I don't see kids playing outside anymore.
You don't see that here either.
You don't.
No, no. If you see, like, I remember during the summer, say the kids you see, it's the same kids. It's the same. There's the same 4 kids in my neighborhood because they'd
Mhm.
had helped me get the pizza delivery driver's attention one day. It was really cool of them because I was super hangry as fuck. And in the day of GPS, in the days of GPS, this pizza delivery driver's like, and I'm on the porch. And she goes down in the road. I was checking all the houses. Why did you check your GPS? Anyway, these kids, God bless them, ran that woman down on their mountain bikes and drug her back up to my house. So, but there's barely any kids out anymore.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I don't know if they're figuring out their gender or what, but it's time to come outside.
It really is.
It's time to touch grass, kids. All right, TikTok is AIDS. Get off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were always up to mischief. We were always
Mhm.
rolling up random dried grass and leaves before we could get cigarettes and smoking those. Somebody always had a dirty magazine. And I can't imagine, like, now with the fucking God, with phones, Jesus Christ.
Mhm.
And you know, I wish we had this technology when I was a kid because we would have either used it, we probably would have used it for profit for sure, because we were always doing something that was skirting the law.
Mhm.
And it would have been funny as hell. We'd had multiple viral videos. We missed out.
Do you think, Negs, do you think that there should be a limit on what people can and cannot say?
I don't think you should be able to threaten people and put them in fear of their life,
Mhm.
regardless of what they do. Um, there's a process for that. If somebody does something to you, like takes down your channels, you don't threaten to shoot them. You just tell them to go fuck themselves and move on with your life, because you can't murder people over that. And you can't go around making people feel uncomfortable in their daily lives just because you're uh, feeling a certain way. But this is a slippery slope because um, I don't ever want the government to intervene and tell me what I can and cannot say. But I also think that if you are using your language for evil, then it should be recognized and you should be punished accordingly. Like if you say a bunch of stuff like that woman did the other day, and somebody else goes and hurts this person,
Right.
then you should be held accountable to some degree in that, because you incited it. But that's why laws like harassment and intimidation and incitement exist.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, it doesn't remove accountability
Mhm.
for your words.
Right. 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 But countering words with violence it's not proportionate.
No.
No, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. Making threats. And by threats, I mean tangible threats. Not because you write a diss track, not because you write a song, not because you do something like that, but when you say, I am going to do XYZ in the following manner. No, no, no. That's a totally different kettle of
Right.
fish.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, in if you have creative license, you have creative license. Go listen to. We just wrote a song. I just wrote a song the other day and produced a song. It's completely about murder. Am I going to go to prison now because I was creative and wrote a catchy song about murder? No, no, because it's been happening for years and decades, and it's part of hip hop culture. To be honest with you, with violence and misogyny and all that stuff.
Mhm.
So and there are instances even in with these people that have creative license where they're making legit threats that get followed. They follow through with them, and then that song is taken to court and they are held accountable. I've seen that happen where the creative license is thrown out once you say you're going to go to O Block and open up, and then O Block's opened up, and somebody dies. Then they could use your creative license against you.
Mhm. When did that happen?
It's There are several instances of these songs being admitted as evidence
Oh, okay.
with the inner city gang violence.
Okay.
But there's so many shootings, but just pick one, throw a dart, that one,
Mhm.
because there's a whole culture that's bred in the inner city where people are just slaughtering one another over words on Instagram and the internet and doing it's just such a waste of human life.
Mhm.
But yeah, if I go and write a song about committing a crime and then I commit that crime, then they can use that against you.
Okay, so here is another question for you. Speaking of songs and violence and all that, it's a cart before the horse question. So, I think it was either NWA or Public Enemy that was referred to as the CNN of the inner city. And so, are they broadcasting or are they rapping about stuff that is happening, or are they part of creating a culture of violence?
Oh, I believe that it started out rapping about what was happening to now that's all that is happening.
Mhm.
And I honestly believe that when the rise of gangster rap in the 90s had a negative influence on the inner cities because the gang violence and the severity of gang violence has increased in such a degree in a short period of time in 40 years.
Mhm.
And most of it revolves around hip hop culture, money, material possessions, women, drugs, I mean, but if that's what you grow up around and that's all then that's what, it's like like kids who grew up around the Italian mafia. That's what they were ushered into.
The reason I ask is because, I mean, what you guys experienced here in the Midwest with fentanyl
Mhm.
was what we experienced in the inner cities or the big cities with crack in the 1980s. And in that case, you had people dealing, slinging rock, who would never in a million years be able to make that kind of money doing anything else. Never. And so when you have that kind of money floating around, you are going to have violence attached to it.
Yeah.
It is a violent, violent way to make a living. So I would wonder, well, were those groups just singing or rapping about what they observed on a daily basis? Um, or were they creating part of the problem? I mean, I can tell you that, not growing up, but living in neighborhoods that were really crappy in the 80s, because they were the only places I could afford to live at the time. Where you would walk down the street and you would crunch the empty crack vials, or you would, kick the empty syringes out of the way or whatever. And you had the gangs running the neighborhood. And they were kids, they were teenagers, where the oldest ones were maybe in their early 20s. This was a reality of life in these cities. And so, okay, so NWA and Public Enemy singing about police violence or police harassment or drugs or whatever. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I really don't. But it's true that that genre of music took a really ugly turn from the 1980s, where it was kind of fun, where you had Run DMC and Houdini and, sweet kind of clean bands like that. And then they took a dramatic political turn by the time you were coming of age in the 90s. Totally changed.
And the violence of the gangs increased majorly in the late 80s and the 90s. I mean, that's where we got this culture now, a culture of murder. That's why it's so just like you were talking about. It's just par for the course for people to get shot and have funerals all the time.
Mhm.
And it's just like that some places. It's not normal here, but like you said, what's normal to the spider is chaos to the fly. So, or what's chaos to the fly is normal to the spider,
Mhm.
rather. But I would have to say that all of these rappers, they're all just perpetuating an issue that needs to be addressed if they really want to have a better future. But it's going to take decades to fix it, because it's cultural at this point. And how do you change a culture that is ever evolving to become more violent and desperate?
What YouTube Reject says here, I mean, this is something that we saw too.
Yeah.
When she says, then you get suburban kids wanting to act tough. This happened in DC with heroin, when heroin started to get to be a big thing again. And you had kids from the suburbs coming into the city, and the guys who were junkies were like catnip for these, suburban teenage girls. And so these girls would get shaken down a lot by the junkies. and used a lot by the junkies for money and for, a place to crash and food and whatever else, because there was a tremendous glamour attached to being a drug addict. I mean, this is just the way it was in the 80s. It was very, very glamorous, because the guys had that look that we all loved. They were really skinny and really pale with the black hair, and they looked like rock stars. And it was really appealing, but they were also really dangerous, because they were around a dangerous drug. A lot of them were sharing needles, and it was just a dangerous group of people to be around,
Ew.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, even in the 90s, heroin was romanticized to us in the Midwest because all of our heroes were doing it.
Right.
Kurt Cobain, Lane Staley, fucking Shannon Hoon was on all kinds of drugs. All these people that we knew, and then hell, I grew up with Guns N' Roses. They were, yeah. So everybody, all my heroes were on dope. I never shot dope, but it was romanticized. It seemed cool. I remember people wanting to do heroin because Kurt Cobain was a junkie. I'm
Right.
like,
oh yeah.
okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. A lot of people wanted to do heroin in DC, but it was a question of where you would get it. And having to mix with the scumbags who could provide it was not really appealing if you were a very cowardly person by nature. And also you have to learn how to shoot it up if you don't want to chase the drag. You know what I mean? Like it's like a whole thing. But yeah, it was super glamorized, and a lot of us wanted to try it. And a lot of us, like myself, I never tried it because nobody would get it for me. And I was too scared to go to the open air drug market. And I knew there was no way I'd ever be able to inject it. And the fucking junkies wouldn't get it for me because they were like, no, we don't want you to get wrapped up in this lifestyle. They were junkies with the heart of gold, which was very cool. But it was very, very appealing. It was very appealing. And the fashion industry jumped in, with heroin chic and with having models that were skinnier and skinnier with the hollow eyes and the really spindly legs and arms. And it was hugely glamorized. And to say that it wasn't is a lie.
True. And like now they glamorize having a gun and type 2. Get on that runway. Model that trash bag.
Yeah, but it was heroin was all over the 90s music scene, Jana. It was. And those of us who were coming of age in the 80s inherited all those bands from the 70s, and we inherited, Lou Reed, and we inherited Iggy Pop, and we inherited all those guys who were open about their drug addiction and sang about it and glamorized it and glorified it. And we loved it. We loved it. I mean, listen, I remember being a teenager, being in high school and learning about the 27 Club and thinking, oh, well, so Jim Morrison and Janis Joplin died when they were 27. Well, that's old enough. They lived long enough. They were old. They were plenty old. I guess it was their time. No, not really. But sure, it was something that a lot of us were really drawn to, but not all of us got a chance to dabble in, thank God.
No, I did my thing and left after I had kids. I partied for a while, but I was never, banging dope and risking my life for a buzz. But really, what Juliana Colombo in the chat, when during the opioid crisis,
right?
That's when heroin swept into town. People were dying in mass. I can't count the number of people I know that are dead because they went from pain pills to heroin to accidentally getting fentanyl or intentionally getting fentanyl.
Right.
So it's been a sad thing.
Yeah, that's something I see on intervention all the time, where somebody starts off getting a prescription for something. They run out, the pills are scarce, they can't get a hold of them, or they're too expensive. And it's just easier to graduate to smack, and then you're addicted, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah, because it's everywhere.
Right.
Yep.
I know, right? Right, TikTok? Now that you're 37, you can't believe that you're 10 years older than the 27 Club. I'm 30 years older than the 27 Club. And I still can't believe that I was a kid. I was like 16. So to me, 27 was like, you were practically Methuselah. You were so old,
Rip.
I know. So tell me about this. Let's talk about comedy. Limits? No
limits on comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Because comedy, if it offends you and you don't find it funny, go listen to something else. It
Mhm.
has no impact on you. It has no effect on you. And I've not seen a comedian have such a major impact that a whole society has been put into an upheaval and become bigoted towards an entire race of people over one comedian or comedians, because comedians tend to keep each other in check. If somebody gets too racist, they get blacklisted. But I don't think there should be any limits on comedy. We should be able to point out our flaws, even if they are stereotypes, because they still exist, and make each other laugh. If we can't make fun of each other, then what the fuck are we doing? We're just going to be offended, killing each other till the end of time. Stupid.
You know what's sad though is when I look at my idols and I look at their old material. So I look at George Carlin or I look at Chris Rock and I think these guys, they wouldn't be able to make it now if they were getting started now. Now they're legends.
Right.
Or George Carlin's dead, but if he were still alive, he was a legend when he died. And you would not be able to get away with what they've gotten away with. And as a matter of fact, Chris Rock and Jerry Seinfeld both said long time ago, like 10, 15 years ago, that they would never, ever, ever accept a gig on a college campus because they don't want to deal with the bullshit,
Right. Yeah. Pussies.
And Dave Chappelle, I don't know if you heard this story, but Dave Chappelle went to Duke Ellington High School in DC, and he gave a speech in front of the kids. And this was right after the whole transgender blow up on Netflix. And the kids were confronting him about what he had said, and they were all getting all huffy and up in arms. And he basically told the kids to go fuck themselves.
Yeah. Fuck you, little bastard. Who the fuck are you? You're barely through puberty. You gonna tell me about myself? Get out of here.
But there are very, very few people. I mean, Dave Chappelle and Ricky Gervais are two people I can think of off the top of my head who are completely and totally free. And obviously a lot of that has to do with money, the fact that they're insulated because of their fame and their wealth and their Netflix contracts and all of that kind of stuff. But they won't bend to any societal norms. And that's why I love them so much. That's why they're so great.
Me either. I have a different type of legend. I'm a legend on the underground. I don't have money insulation like Dave Chappelle.
But yeah, this is the thing for all the people who are listening. This is comedy, you guys, that we're talking about. It's comedy. It's funny. If you don't think it's funny, that doesn't mean it's a crime. It doesn't mean that you go with pitchforks and torches to go kill the guy. Yeah. It means that you don't think it's funny, and that is okay.
And that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I need to go to the store and get something for dinner.
All right. Okay.
So, should we end it here?
Sure.
That seems like a good spot since we got comedy is a good punctuation point.
Mm-hmm.
So, guys, we are not really on a schedule except weekly. So bear with us. Once these will be uploaded to the Attic Podcast YouTube channel, which I assume is in the description. And if not, it will be. And once we get maybe another episode, we'll start doing the lives over there. We just want to get people over there, and then I will depart from the DC Media Girl channel. I'm over to my own corner of the web.
And see, this is the thing you guys have to understand. These are the conversations that Negs and I have off camera. So they are going to be disorganized. They're going to be rambling, and we don't care. Okay. These are not educational podcasts. These are conversational podcasts. These are supposed to be fun and interesting and spark conversations, in your house or whatever it is that you want to talk about. But this is how Negs and I talk to each other. So, and we love it.
Yeah.
The end.
Good times. All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Bye.